Welcome to Morningstar Christian Chapel YouTube channel. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, like button, and the notification bell so you can find out when we go live or post a new video. And be sure to leave a comment about what God has shown you in this message. Thanks, and enjoy the study.
All right, let's open our Bibles to Psalm 40. The books of the Old Testament are separated into three major headings. There are the historical books, which run from Genesis to Esther. And there are the prophetic books that begin with Isaiah and run to the end of the Old Testament to Malachi. But in the middle there are these books called the books of poetry or psalms and hymns, if you will. They run from Job to the Song of Solomon. They focus primarily, these books that we are now looking at, on a personal, intimate relationship that we have with the Lord. And so everything that's communicated in these books are on that level. It's the love of God and our need and the joy that he brings and the peace that he offers and the despair that he relieves and the fear that he takes from us. If we were to broad brush the Old Testament, we would say that the historical books are the past. And the prophetic books, for the most part, are the future, which leave these books in the middle as the present. And indeed, all of these are written in a present tense relationship. So it has to do with the now, with the today, with what you're going through in the immediate sense. I wanted to focus this morning with you for a few minutes on one truth about God's relationship with you that should revolutionize the way you approach the Lord. I don't know how many of you are busy. I tried to ask this week some folks, are you busy? No one said no. Everyone seems to be busy, and there's all kinds of busy, isn't there? Not just work busy, it's just daily busyness. I said to my wife the other day on our day off, why do we have 16 places to go? We should just cancel them all. You never know, and because we're busy, I think we tend to forget things. Forgot to put the dog out last week. He didn't appreciate it. Forgot to turn off the heater. Forgot to pick up something at the grocery store. The cleaners were supposed to be visited. Maybe you had a date with friends for dinner, or maybe you forgot a birthday, or God forbid you forgot an anniversary. I suspect that's never happened to you since you're all still alive and here. Or an appointment. I remember as a kid being left at school one day, my mom forgot to pick us up. Well, she was too busy. I'm convinced that the older I get, the less I remember. You feel that way too? My great phrase now is, I can't remember, or I forgot. It's a growing folder in my head. I now have to be very careful where I put my keys. Everything now goes to the same place every time. And if I didn't put them there, I have no idea where they are. I have a theory that as you age, you just develop a slower and less concerned outlook, and everything tends to be less important. Old people could care less. It's just the way things go, and I think sometimes that's good. Like if you took me to dinner and I owe you dinner, I forget, I can do that without guilt, I feel great. But other times, I fail to do something I should do, and that's not very good. So busy and forgetfulness tend to go together. And no matter how old you are, we all experience, being so preoccupied that we drop the ball, which I think adds weight to what David writes here in 1000 BC about our present tense relationship with the Lord, regarding the Lord's concern and thoughts towards each of us. And it is made all of the more amazing by the fact that he's pretty busy. And that if anything was to be forgotten, and if it was us, it would be our doom. We've named our study this morning after the prophet Willie Nelson. You are always on my mind. Verse 5 says this, many, O Lord my God, are your wonderful work which you have done, and your thoughts towards us cannot be recounted to you in order. If I were to declare and speak of them, they would be more than can be numbered. And verse 17 ends with the words, I am poor and needy, and yet the Lord thinks upon me. It is hard for me to conceive that God constantly thinks about me. I trust that he, loving me, would think about me from time to time, hopefully with joy and with pleasure. I suspect those who like me do the same. I suspect that those who dislike me think of me more often, not so lovingly. I can understand and believe that God, who loves unconditionally, would think of me now and then as I pray or when I serve him, or more likely, at least in my mind, when I fall on my face in sin and in disappointment. I often picture the Lord thinking of me shaking his head and sighing, maybe muttering something under his breath. There are times in my life when I wish the Lord wouldn't think about me at all, or even look my way. Yet, these two verses, when taken with all that the scripture tells us about God's relationship with us, would suggest that you and I should adopt an entirely different concept of God's attention of our lives. One that concludes that there is not even a split second that I am out of his thoughts. Not a moment when I am out of his mind, not out of his vision, not out of his field of concern, not removed from his willful thoughts, not a moment, never one moment ever. With all of the wonderful works we read in verse 5 that God has done and is doing, it seemed to me that his plate should be overflowing. Talk about a busy schedule. Factor in care for the universe maintenance, we'll call it. The daily care of the heavens and the earth and all that he has made. The psalmist will write in Psalm 95, the Lord is our great God and great King above all gods. In his hand are the deep places of the earth. The heights of the hills are his. The sea is his. He's made it. His hands have formed the dry land. Oh, come, let's worship and bow down. Let's kneel before the Lord our God, our Maker. Nehemiah would declare in chapter 9, you alone are the Lord who has made the heavens and the heavens of heavens and all of the hosts, the earth and everything that's in them, the sea, everything that's in them. You preserve them all. And the hosts of heaven worship you. Wherever you turn, you read about God's maintenance and his involvement in his creation. You can only imagine how his time is filled with these many things. We read in the book of Job, chapter 12, verse 10, that in his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. That's a busy God. What if it would cause him to forget for a moment that I needed to breathe again in a few seconds? And again, and again, and again. I don't read in the Bible anywhere where he left that up to AI. It says my breath is in his hands. And multiply that by every person in the planet, every animal that roams the earth, every fish that swims in the sea, every bird that flies through the sky, and so on. And then I read, if I were to count the number of times you think about me, there's not enough numbers. There's no way to count. I run out. The vastness of the universe over which he rules as Lord, the heavens and the earth and the stars and the orbits. It so overwhelmed David that he wrote in Psalm chapter 8, when I consider the heavens and the work of your hands and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him? And yet he is. We might get busy and get preoccupied. God is never too busy to keep his mind upon you. Should make you feel better. He knows you that well. The stars and the planets and their orbits all at the same time. Not one of them runs into each other. There's no crash and there's no unfortunate development. He's mindful of them all. The speed, the countless billions without a hitch. Job was told by the Lord when he was put in his place about his confidence in the Lord and who God was. Have you been able to bind the cluster of the Pleiades, or loose the belt of Orion? Can you call out Mazzaroth in its season, or can you guide the great bear with its cubs? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you set their dominions over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that an abundance of water can cover you? Can you send out lightning that they will go? Can you say, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the mind? Who has given understanding to the heart? Who has given numbers to the clouds by wisdom? Who has poured them out as bottles of heaven? And on the Lord goes. Who feeds the raven when the young ones cry out and they lack food? And the Lord said, it's me. You want to know how busy he is? There goes the Pleiades, there goes Orion, there goes them ravens. Hungry again. Lord, I'm getting it. He takes care of them all. We have read, maybe you have read, that there's a new potential asteroid headed our way. The next 2 years, it's very likely to hit the earth and kill us all. Oh boy. Several years ago, there was a report before NASA came up with their new service that there was an asteroid who had missed the Earth. It was a half a mile wide. It was traveling within 500,000 miles of us at 50,000 miles an hour. So it missed us by 10 hours. They said if it had hit the Earth, it would have left a crater 10 miles across, 10 miles deep. The unnerving thing was they told us the day after it happened. No contingency plan. So NASA came up with what they today call NEO-WISE, a bunch of letters which stands for Near Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer. I'm just glad the Lord is watching over me. That NEO-WISE thing doesn't seem to be working out at all. And with all of that going on, I feel his thoughts every moment of every day. And I admit to you, it is way too difficult to comprehend. But I know that it's so. So the comparison that the psalmist makes in verse 5 here was that the wonderful works which God has done and is doing, when compared to the thoughts for us, brings a staggering conclusion. Even though he is so busy doing so much, we cannot begin to catalog or number his thoughts towards us. They are innumerable. He runs the universe, provides breath for all, feeds every plant, every bird, every life, and yet he doesn't take his eyes off of you. We had a fly get into our house the other day, and I said to the Lord, why did you make this thing? It would buzz by and leave the door open, and he's going to go out. No, he's too smart to go out. He's staying in. And I watched him land on the ceiling, and I thought, how did he know when to flip over? And I said to the Lord again, you didn't need to make this thing. I used to go fishing with my dad. I hated fishing. I'd get sick in a boat. But he would so be excited when I would go, and I would just be sick the whole trip. But the thing I remembered most was we could be 10 miles offshore when they decided they were going to dump the bait because they were done for the day. And all of a sudden, all these seagulls would show up. 10 miles offshore. Who told them there was food? I think the Lord, there you go. Pretty sure God was involved in that. We had these ash flies. You ever seen these little things? On a bush in our house last year. They're so small, they have a mind of their own, and their purpose is to eat your whole bush. And there's thousands of them, and you get, they're just horrible. And you spray or you wash or you do, and they just come back and return. Finally, we found something that killed them all, and we're so thankful. But Lord, why did you make this at all? Now you got to take care of it. I read, or actually watched a National Geographic thing on TV the other night, where they have found a new species of fish that they'd never cataloged before. And it was the coolest looking thing. It was gruesome looking. I don't want one, but it was, they said that it only existed below 3.5 miles in the ocean. And I thought, well, goodness gracious, why make that at all? Aren't you busy enough watching over me? Luminescent, very odd shaped. Lord, you have done such great work. And yet you read in verse 5, with all that you have done, you think of me so much I can't begin to count how often you do. It's just the contrast, so it drives home the point. You're always on his mind. The psalmist would write in Psalm 121, verse 4, the one who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And I read that with a new appreciation the other day, thinking, well, of course not. Look how busy he is. Who's got time to sleep? But the Lord watches over us. Verse 17 adds these thoughts that we are poor and needy, and yet the Lord thinks upon us. Or if you like, if you want to add to the understanding, we have little to bargain with God to say, I'm attractive, you should think about me, I'm important, I'm worthwhile. No, we're poor and needy. We're just another need in his list of things to care for. God, help me now. I'm on his mind. For those who love him and follow him in faith, his thoughts are to bless you, to reward you, to guide you, to direct your steps. For you that have no relationship with the Lord, his desire is only one thing. He wants to save you, to reveal your sin to you, to show you the predicament that you're in and the solution that he has brought. He wants to win you and woo you by his Spirit. But no matter what position you're in, your thoughts or his thoughts are on you this morning. In terms of creation, we don't appear to be very significant in size. We're made of dust, for one thing, a speck on the face of the earth, populated now by over 8 billion specks, one planet rotating around the sun, one star in the billions of the Milky Way, one galaxy in the millions that exist. And yet God can't get enough of you, his creation. Isaiah wrote this, have you not known, have you not heard? Has it not been shown to you from the beginning? Has you not understood, even from the foundations of the earth, that it is he who sits above the circle of the earth? Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretch out to the heavens like a curtain. He spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Scarcely shall they be planted, scarcely shall they be sown, scarcely shall their stock take root in the earth, when he also blows them away and they wither, and the whirlwind will take them away like stubble. To who shall we liken me, or who is my equal, says the Lord? Lift up your eyes, see who has created these things, who brings them out by number. He calls them by name. By the greatness of his power and the strength of his power, not one is missing. And yet the Lord thinks about you. It just is almost too good to be true. The stars whizzing by, the planets spinning by, asteroids racing through the heavens, flies, fish, ants, plants, insects. And God thinks about you, and not just once in a blue moon. You're the object of his special interest. You're the one he is concerned about constantly. In Matthew chapter 10, the Lord said to the boys, "Are not two sparrows sold for a copper coin? Not one of them falls to the ground except for your Father's will. The numbers of your hair are numbered." And I thought, well, that's not impressive, but some of you, that's very impressive. Do not fear, you are far more valuable than the sparrows. God has so much to do, and you're at the top of his list. I think it was Zechariah who declared as the Lord spoke, he sent me after his glory to the nations which shall plunder you. For if you touch you touch the apple of God's eye. That's you this morning. Going back to verse 5, the question becomes, well, then how often does the Lord think about us? We are told here in the text that his thoughts could not begin to be listed by order or numbered to capacity. Psalm 139, I know you've sang it, how precious are your thoughts towards me, O Lord, how great is the sum of them. If I should number them, they would be more than the sands of the sea, and when I'm awake, I'm with you. David declared that if we were to try to number the thoughts that God had towards us, they would be equal to the sands of the sea. 25 years ago, some scientists determined that the sands of the sea were roughly equal to 10 to the 25th power of grains. And these smart guys also said, that's about the same number of stars in the heavens. Now, someone asked me once, how did they come up with that? And my answer is, I have no idea. But it's a good place to start. 10 to the 25th power, or 10 followed by 25 zeros, if you will. If you live to be 70 years old, the average lifespan for someone, at least from a biblical perspective, you have lived to be about 10 to the 9th power. So, that would conclude that the Lord thinks about you 3 times a second. That's if all those numbers are right, and I have no idea if they are. But when David says there would be more than I could count, more than the grains of sand, he'd be right. They'd be 2.5 times that much. Obviously, I can conclude with confidence that there's no time when the Lord doesn't think about me. He's thinking about me right now. Is he happy? That's another question, but he's thinking about me right now. He thought about me before I was born. He'll think about me when I go to be with him. I'm always on his mind, and that multiplies multiple times a second. Why does he think about you so often? Am I part of his maintenance checklist? No. It's because he loves you. When you love someone, you think about them often. When my wife was asked to go away and speak somewhere, I hate it. I try to get her out of it. I don't have a guy's night out. I like to hang out with my wife. Yet to meet a guy I like as much as the wife. That's all I'm saying. You like to hang out when someone loves you. God is that way for us. He thinks of you in loving terms, and Satan would like to distort that understanding that God thinks of you so often, or that he only thinks about you when discipline is needed, or far worse, he stopped thinking about you at all. Jeremiah, the prophet, would write, the Lord saying to us, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil. I want to give you a future, and I want to give you a hope. Good thoughts. Constantly. And by the way, those words from Jeremiah from the Lord to Israel was spoken at a time when Israel was miserably failing the Lord, was headed in the wrong direction, was on a course of self-destruction, and would eventually end up with them being taken into captivity by the Babylonians. But God's thoughts were good. His thoughts were never to destroy, but rather to give an expected end, all of those for our peace and benefit. God's thinking about you. And you never need to go pray and go, Lord, I'm sorry to bother you. Oh, you're not bothering him. You're just joining him as he considers your life. But what should that really do for your life in knowing these things to be so? I would think more than anything, it would give you tremendous comfort. Look, life is filled with danger and distress, and there's lots of fear, oftentimes loneliness. But to know that God sees me, knows all about me, knows what I'm going through, feels what I'm feeling, that I'm on his mind. I'm not alone. I don't need to explain myself much to him. He knows me. It gives me comfort. It gives me also great courage. You know, sometimes the world can look pretty dangerous. The enemy can look pretty intimidating. Life can look like it's stacked against me, but I know that God is watching, knows my predicament, actively caring for me, and enabling me to be brave and face the challenges without fear, because I'm always on his mind. Great comfort, great love that he has for me. More than anything else, to know that I am important in the eyes of the Lord and occupies his thoughts is amazing. What it demands of me is that maybe I should think about him more often, because I don't always like I should. I should certainly think about him more than an hour on Sundays or church night during the week. We read in 1 Samuel saying, only fear the Lord, serve him with the truth and from your heart, and consider what great things he's done for you. Think about him more. The psalmist would write in Psalm 143, I think it's verse 5, I remember the days of old, and I meditate upon all your works and muse on the works of your hands. I should think about him more. He thinks about me constantly. I should think about him more often. The psalmist would write in Psalm, just 8 chapters ahead, I think Psalm 48, verse 9, we have thought about you, Lord, thought about your loving kindness in the midst of the temple. I should take into account he and his love and have a place in my thoughts that occupy it often for him. Isaiah wrote this, you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed upon you because he trusts in you. He's always thinking about you. Your willingness to think about him and all that he's promised you will bring you peace, give you courage, bring you comfort, convince you of his love, and enable you, not because you're worth it or have much to offer. No, we're poor and needy, but God made us. He loves us. I don't need to impress him or convince him. He loves us. And David in 1000 BC was able to understand that the love of God was such that he couldn't begin to recount in order all that God has done. They were beyond his comparisons. Is God busy? Yep. What's he busy with? You. He keeps his eyes on you while he does like this to run the world. You're the apple of his eye. Shall we pray? Father, how good it is this morning to know your love. To consider even for 5 minutes, Lord, the relationship that we have in this present time of your thoughts and your concerns, your attention, and your devotion to us as your people. With all that you do, with all that you've done, with the great works of your hand, You have time and have chosen and have declared to us that your mind is constantly upon your people, our lives, our needs, our ways. You are all in for us. May you help us this morning to be more mindful of that so that we would be more mindful of you throughout the day, as we open your word in the morning, as we go to pray, as we consider our lives, and to be reminded again of your constant thought. May we be encouraged and comforted and emboldened and assured of your great love, so that we don't come to the wrong conclusions about our God, about the situations or the circumstances we find ourselves in. You are for us, not against us. You've come to give us a hope. We're always on your mind. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, God. Shall we stand?